Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where we will be discussing how to verify trig identities. Or in other words, we're going to be solving to make one side of the equal sign equal to the other. So like the previous video, we will be solving the side that looks more complicated. So in this case, it's going to go ahead and be the left-hand side. So the first step we're going to do is change this whole left-hand side into terms of sine and cosine so that it's easier to solve. So for example, secant x, we can go ahead and change it into 1 over cosine x minus cosine x. And we're just going to go ahead and put that over 1 so that we have two fractions in the numerator and it's easier to just look at. Over 1 over cosine x. So we went ahead and changed the numerator into 1 over cosine x or secant x minus cosine x over 1 all over the denominator, which is secant x or 1 over cosine x. So the next step we can go ahead and do is go ahead and break up the fraction. So we can do 1 over cosine x over 1 over cosine x, which is this part right here. And we're going to subtract that from cosine x over 1 over 1 over cosine x, which is this part right here. So we went ahead and broke up the fraction into two separate parts. So we know that 1 over cosine x over 1 over cosine x is just 1 minus, and since we're doing cosine x over 1 over cosine x, we can go ahead and multiply cosine x over 1 times cosine x over 1. So what we did here is that we essentially took the denominator and took the reciprocal so that we can go ahead and get rid of the denominator. So we know that we get 1 minus, we just multiply across, cosine squared x. Since this would be over 1, we just got rid of the 1. So now that we know that it's 1 over cosine squared x, an important equation to know, as discussed in the last video, is this very important trig identity, which is sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1. So like I said in the last video, and I'm going to reiterate again, this identity is very, very essential into verifying trig identities, and learning how to solve trig identities and knowing how to manipulate this equation is also very, very important. So we see here that we have 1 minus cosine squared x, and we know that 1 minus cosine squared x is equal to sine squared x. And this is because if we were to take cosine squared x and multiply it on each, or subtract it from each side, excuse me, as seen here, we would get sine squared x, which is equal to 1 minus cosine squared x. So as you can see here, we were able to manipulate this equation in yellow so that we were able to get sine squared x. And we were able to do the same thing as well if we were to get cosine squared x. We're able to subtract sine squared x from each side of the equal sign and get cosine squared x is equal to 1 minus sine squared x. So that is why we know that 1 minus cosine squared x is equal to sine squared x, which is equal to the right-hand side of our equation. And that is how you verify this trig identity.